Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Sanchez. I'm a reporter at WJLA in Washington, D.C. I'm also one of the news board members on NPPA, which is very big privilege for me that they let in a reporter. So, but I was first an MMJ. So first and foremost. So I always have a camera in my hand. I'm always shooting stuff still. So this is really exciting for me because one of my first cameras was a Sony P2 camera. Way back in the day. So I have a love for Sony. So thank you for joining us. So we have Dave Brooks with us. He is a CNN photographer based in DC, just around the corner from me. And he's worked in local news in Alaska and Australia prior to his CNN gig. And his recent news assignments with the Sony Z280 camera include the 2020 Lafayette Square riots in Washington, DC, BLM protests, the killing of George Floyd, Dante Wright riots, and protests in Minnesota, and protests over the killing of Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. So thank you so much for joining us, Dave. And we have Joseph Peretzman. He is the sales support engineer manager for Sony Electronics. He has been with Sony for more than 3 decades. Joe has been providing pre and post sales support to Sony's most important customers of broadcast and professional products for 34 years, and over his tenure, he has represented and supported a wide range of broadcast products and underlying technologies that make today's products possible. Joe is currently leading his expertise to the fields of wireless video transmission and ENG acquisition and workflow. So Joe and Dave, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna let you go ahead and take the wheel here.
Okay,
Thank you, Victoria. Hi there, I'm Dave. I work for CNN and have worked in local before that. I'm here, not representing CNN, representing myself here, and excited to talk about the 280. I use the 280. It's not my everyday camera, but I do use it quite often. And I know Joe is going to be the guy to talk to for any of the technical questions. He's going to be really good at walking you through basically everything you need to know about the camera. If you've got any questions about how we use the camera and what kind of configurations that we have at CNN, by all means, jump in the chat, ask the questions. But Joe, you've got your presentation queued up.
well, you should be able to see it, right?
Oh yeah, we can see it.
Okay, very good. All right, so first of all, this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And we're going to talk about the Z280 camera today. These are just different views of the camera. We have 211 slides to go through, so we're going to go through them quickly. The assumptions about this whole presentation are, number one, we're going to be talking about ENG type work, and although the camera is very suitable for feature film magazine work as well as cinema type work, the primary focus is going to be on ENG. The camera is both standard dynamic range and high dynamic range capable. And since ENG is currently using SDR, standard dynamic range, that's what we're going to be talking about mostly. The camera is 4K, HD, and SD capable, but right now, since most broadcasters are using HD, that's again what we'll be concentrating on talking about. And the topics we'll be glossing over due to time are in-depth discussion of networking setup options and of wireless audio setup. And if there's a call for that, we'd be happy to do it. So first of all, getting into the menus. There are multiple ways of getting into the menus. On the side of the camera, you can press the menu button, or on the top of the camera, you can press the menu button. And these are the navigation tools to navigate both on the side and the top. However, my favorite way of navigating is using the joystick that is on the side of the camera. You can basically press it any way that you want, and that's where the focus will go. And you can press it in as a set button. This is a much faster way of navigating menus. The menu organization. So menus are grouped by functional categories. People always complain about Sony menus, and yeah, I get it, but if you understand how they're done, it actually makes a lot of sense. If an item is grayed out, it means that some other setting is active and it's incompatible with the grayed out onion. To find the conflicting items, the easiest way is to check the notes in the manual, or after you have experience, and then you'll know exactly what's going on without looking at the manual. And here's what I mean by checking the notes. Like, for example, if you're trying to get into the slow and quick motion and you see that it's grayed out, you don't know why, this tells you all the different reasons why you might not be able to get into the slow and quick. And also right above the notes, there was the real reason is because it only works for progressive and not for interlaced. Okay, so this is going to be a quick tour of the different categories. There's the user category. This is nothing more than your shortcuts or favorite. Every setting here is in some other menu. But these are just your shortcuts or your favorites to get to those items quickly. The camera menu are the basic operations of the camera. The paint sets the look of the camera. I'm going to stop here to pause a little bit talking about changing the paint items. Here are the caveats. First of all, if your station or network has provided you with scene files, then they should be used. I mean, that's kind of like obvious because you want your camera to match what they're doing, and they probably have very, very good people setting those up. I know, for example, CNN has some fabulous scene files, and that's what should be used. In my opinion, it's okay to experiment with the various paint menus, but not on a shoot. That may be obvious, but honestly, not on a shoot. To properly evaluate the effects of the paint menu, you should be using a calibrated evaluation monitor and various scopes like a waveform monitor, vector scope, etc. But if you're just experimenting, playing around, you can use whatever you want to use, but just understand that what you're seeing may not be the actual effect of what's going on. It's essential, you have to take a new look all the way through the entire workflow to make sure that it doesn't create problems downstream. And that can sometimes happen where basically the whole workflow is set up for one kind of a look, one kind of a gamma, and you've changed it, and it may look good to you, but it totally messes up everything when they go to put it to air. And if you do develop a better look, don't just start using it. You have to remember two things. One is that you're part of a team. Everybody's material has to match everybody else's. So rather than just starting to use it, share it with your chief photographer, explain to him why, or her, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And if it's really good, then everybody will start using it. The paint menu defaults and suggestions. First of all, the default paint menu settings will almost always result in usable material. They're very conservative, and it'll work. You may think they're a bit flat, but it will work. The following changes may be helpful. Number one, change the paint gamma select from standard 5 to standard 3. This will add a little bit more contrast to the picture, especially in the shadow areas. Change the knee point from 95 to 91%. This will slightly compress the highlights and give you a little bit more leeway as far as dealing with overexposed areas. Then change the paint adaptive matrix to on. By default, this is off. This helps tame the supersaturated blues. Where do you get supersaturated blues? Well, anybody who shot riots at night knows that police lights are bright blue, and they totally, just wreak havoc on most cameras. This will help tame them. It won't get rid of the flare, but it will tame it, and it will show you details in the blue areas. It has a slight effect on supersaturated reds as well. There are some people who feel you should only use it when you need it, and there are other people who feel that it's not going to hurt you, you're not going to see it. It's just a nice safety thing, and I'm personally of the second camp. Just leave it on. Next, there's the audio. And so here you set the audio parameters, both input and output. There's video. This is strictly the output parameters. There's the viewfinder screens. These are where you set up the tools that you're going to be using on both the LCD and the viewfinder. Timecode user bits are pretty obvious. The recording. This is where you're setting up different modes, different special recording modes. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Thumbnails is where you can review clips and actually set clip options like locking or unlocking a clip, or deleting it, or copying it, or whatever. Media is where you deal with the media related functions. And I'll just mention something right now. On Sony, cameras, if you format the media, it's a one-way street. You can never, ever undo it. This is done because Sony's a media company, and if you format your media and give it to somebody else, we want to make sure that they cannot recover what you had on there. So it's gone. Just keeping that in mind. The file menu saves and recalls all the camera settings, and they're broken up into categories. So you can save, for example, just the favorites file, the user file. You can save everything. You can save just the paint file, and the network public key. This is for streaming to social media. The network, this accesses and controls all the network functions. And the system is the camera setup, if you will, under the hood. And this is where we're going to start. In fact, when I get a new camera out of the box, I always start from the bottom and I work my way up. It's kind of like the base, and you work your way up. And even here, I start with the bottom of the camera. And the first thing to check is, what is the version of the camera? So this is the very last item in the camera menu. And the current version for the Z280 on June 23rd, 2021 is version 4.0. So how do you find the new versions? Well, you go to the Sony site. If you put into your browser pro.sony, that'll take you to the https://pro.sony.com, and it'll take you to the local site. I say local because every country has their own versions of it. Then you click on the magnifier and you enter the model name. When you get to the model name, this will get you on the landing page for that model. Some of the landing pages have the resources tab right on the page. In this case, you don't. Just scroll down up until you see the resources. When you see the resources, click on the resources, and that'll take you to the top of the resource page. So the beginning is with the brochures and the knowledge base. You keep scrolling down, you will get to the support page, and there you'll see manuals, software, and firmware. You go to the manuals, and in this case over here, we have the latest operating instructions, and that's always good to have, because if you've been using the camera and then there's a major upgrade, chances are there's some new features and functions that are explained in the manual. There'll also be release notes that'll tell you specifically what has changed. In this case also, there's a setup guide for wireless network connection, and this tells you how to set up the camera for different networking scenarios. And it says wireless, but it can also be wired, by the way. If I go to the software page, so over here, you'll see that there is the firmware. This is version 4.00. And there's also software which is for the streaming setting transfer. This is for doing the RTMP and RTMP-S to go to social media. Just be aware of something. We use the term software and firmware interchangeably. They mean the same thing. It honestly depends on which engineer or group developed it. Some people call it software, some people call it firmware. It's the very same thing. Don't get thrown by that. Then working up from version, there is an all reset. We have two flavors. There's the standard reset that resets everything, and the reset without network does not reset the network, which is kind of nice because you don't have to put in all of your settings, which are a real pain to put in, but it's got to be done at some point. Just letting you know that that's what the difference is. Although sometimes if the network's not working, you may have to do a network reset as well. There is a GPS in the camera, and again, I'm skipping things. I'm trying to hit on only the important items just for the sake of time. So there's a GPS receiver in the handle. You can turn it on if you want. Do not worry. This will not phone home and tell people where you really are. It will not track a lost camera, unfortunately. The GPS information is attached as metadata to the clip, and the GPS location can be sent to a station if you are connected to them over the network client mode. but that means that you're connected to them, and someone who's not connected cannot possibly find you. This is critical. The clock set has to be set properly. It needs to be set for the proper network functioning, because we exchange certificates, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be close. Don't worry about the seconds, but you should be close. Minutes are perfectly fine. I just want to make a little diversion about something. If you don't use the camera for a couple of months, there's a backup battery that's internal that needs to be recharged. And so you just keep the camera on for about a day, and that'll recharge it. But hopefully everybody's using the cameras more often than that, so you won't run into that. There's an assignable button. There are 10 buttons on the camera, and there are defaults, and then there are open buttons, and you can change any and all the buttons, even the pre-assigned buttons. And this is how you customize the camera to do what you need it to do when for any given assignment. Record format is where you set up how the camera is going to record, and it better match what your station is doing. And for here, we're dealing with, first of all, the frequency. These are all the possible frequencies. Yes, 50 and 25 are for Europe, 5994, 2997, 2398 are for the US, 2398 is for movies, basically. The file system. You got choices, use exFAT. UDF is meant as backwards compatible for the legacy PDW cameras. I suggest you don't use it. And the FAT mode is for the old EX1, EX3 cameras. Again, I suggest you do not use it. Use the exFAT. It's much more flexible. You can do all the formats with exFAT, and it's much more robust. Then there's the codec. You have to choose the codec that you want. Now, basically, you're not going to choose something at random. You're going to choose what the station tells you to be using. However, I can't tell you how many people mix up XAVC-I and XAVC-L. XAVC-I is intra-frame coding, and that is very, very data intense. Every frame is fully encoded. I don't recommend using that especially for ENG. You might use that for very high-end Hollywood production. XAVC-L is more than enough for ENG type of work. The MPEGs are for compatibility with the older systems. And again, some places I know are using the older MPEGs because they want everything to match. So, and then there's DVCAM is basically standard definition. And then the video format. So this is where you have to make sure that you're shooting in what your station is going to be broadcasting, or what they tell you to be using. Typically, we'll be using 1920 by 1080i and either 50 or 35. 35 would be equivalent to XAVC-L 35 is equivalent to MPEG-2 HD 42250. So you save 30% data. But if you want the best experience, then just use XAVC L50 and it'd be 1920 1080i or 1280 720p. Okay, next there are two shooting modes. There's standard dynamic range and high dynamic range. I'm not going to really get into the high dynamic range, but I just want to point out a couple things about it because you'll be using SDR for most things. When you do turn on the HDR, you then have the following choices in the HDR settings. You can either do HLG, which stands for hybrid log gamma, or you can do S-log. S-log is a full and proper HDR signal. It gives you a digital negative, that we call it, and it must be graded. HLG is something that you can play directly out on an HDR HLG compatible monitor. You can turn on or off the viewfinder standard dynamic range preview. So if you turn it on, then what you see in the viewfinder is a SDR picture, even though you're recording HDR, and it makes it a whole lot easier to evaluate the picture and what you're doing. And then the SDR gain is just, minus 6 dB is the standard ratio between HDR and SDR. Okay, then you get to the recording mode. So right away, you see over here, for example, in this case, S&Q motion is grayed out, and it's grayed out because we happen to be in a mode. We're using interlace, so you can't do slow and quick motion. Slow and quick motion gives you the, lets you record at off speeds anywhere from 1 frame per second up to 60 frames per second. Into record is time lapse basically, and you can set up all the parameters there. Next one is picture cache record. On picture cache record, you can set, you can basically turn on or off, and typically you will put this to one of the assignable buttons. And the picture cache record time can be set to anything from 4 seconds to 28 seconds. Now, for those of you who have not used Sony cameras, we always give you 2 numbers because Sony is a very conservative number, and God forbid we should tell you that we're going to give you 8 seconds. We only give you 7.9 seconds. So we give you this range. I've never in my entire life seen it be anything but the larger number. So you can count on the larger number. That being said, don't use more time than what you need. People have the tendency to say, well, okay, I got 28 seconds, I'm just going to use it. Well, that means you're going to have 28 seconds header on every single clip that you do. So if you're doing something like a stakeout, and you don't know, when something's going to happen, 28 seconds is perfectly fine. You're basically only doing 1 clip, and it's great. But if you're doing something like sports, or you just want to cover for your reaction time, then maybe 4 seconds or maybe 8 seconds are all that you need. Simultaneous record lets you record to both cards at the same time. And under simultaneous, well, I'll get to that afterwards. So then there's proxy record. So proxy record lets you record a lower bit rate copy of the video at the same time that you're recording the high resolution or the full resolution video. And the choices are anywhere from 1920, 1080 I at 9 megabits, all the way down to a 480 by 270 1/2 megabit. So the 1920, both of the 9 megabits are fully broadcast capable. I mean, they're good enough to broadcast, and no one will question it. No one will say, "Ha, that's proxy." No one will even know it. The 6 megabits, under certain circumstances, you may see a bit of artifacting, but generally it'll be great. Then you have the 640 by 360. That's basically standard definition. When would you use the 3 megabits? You would use the 3 megabits when I want to send the video back wirelessly, and I don't have the bandwidth, so I'm going to basically down-res it. The picture will be slightly softer, there may be a bit of aliasing, but it's actually quite good. And the 480 by 270, those are really, you're going to use those if you only want to have a record of what you shot, or if you're really in a data constricted area and you've got to get the stuff back, and so you're going to use one of these. But basically 3 is the default. I tend to use one of the 2 9s, but you have to be careful because you can't use 1920 1080 because that's an interlace and they won't play on an Apple device. Excuse me, I just got to turn off my phone, which is okay. All right, and then the other thing is that there are only 2 channels recorded, so you can pick and choose channel 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. Okay, I'm just going to skip through things that we just don't have time for here. So this is the ND filter. This is the clear setting, and I said for 1, 2, or 3, and by default that's 1/4, 1/16, or 1/64 if this second switch is in the preset mode. And I can change those by going to the menu. I go to the camera, to the ND filter setting, and I change preset 1, 2, or 3, and I can make any one of these or all of them any value. They can all be the same. They can be backwards. You can do anything you want to do. If I take this switch, I put it into the variable mode, and if this is on 1, 2, or 3, then I have a continuously variable ND filter. And by the way, this filter does not use polarization, so it will not interfere with the polarizing filter that you may put on front. It's actually quite amazing technology. Next, we have the gain and the white balance. So the gain settings, they can be set anywhere from -3 dB to 18 dB and then 42 dB. 42 dB is only assignable to the turbo gain switch, which you could then access by putting it to one of the assignable buttons. And here's how you get to it. And by the way, -3 dB is a very good setting to be using on this camera. It is lower noise and it does not affect the dynamic range very much. Okay, and then this is how you would put the assignable, how you put turbo gain onto one of the assignable buttons. Here I just am putting it to button number 3. The white balance can be set for preset A or B, and there is you can adjust it using a preset white select on one of the assignable buttons, and that'll cycle through 3200K tungsten, 4300 fluorescent, 5600 daylight, and 6300 open shade. And again, this is how you would go to the assignable buttons. I put it to the very same button here, just as an example here. So button number 3 is set preset white select. Every time I press that, it'll cycle through one of these values. This is where the headphone jack is. This is the audio controls, the cover close. Here's a close-up. So for input 1, this is where I pick and choose what the source is. It can be line level, it can be mic with 48 volt phantom power. It can be set for internal, for external, or the MI shoe. The external are the XLRs that are on the side of the camera, just in front of the top panel. I can do the same thing for input number 2. And I set the levels using these knobs for channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I set so if this green line is straight up, that's the auto position, it is click stop, or you can go to any of the other values. Now, the question you have to be thinking about is, okay, this is how I choose the routing for input 1 and 2. Where's the routing for inputs 3 and 4? Well, those are menu selections. So you go to the audio input. And the first item is channel 2 external input select. Channel 2 external, what that does is that says what will go to channel 2. Is it input 1 or is it input 2? And you maybe scratch your head saying, huh? Why would I put input 1 onto input 2? And by the way, by default, it actually is input 1. Okay. And the reason for it is one of 2 use cases. Number 1 is I just have one mono microphone and I want to have both channels. So this is an easy way of copying the input 1 to channel 1 and to channel 2. The other case is that maybe I've got a person who is not a professional speaker and their voice is all over the place. Sometimes they're very soft and sometimes they're very, very loud. So you may put input 1 at the best level that you think manually, and input 2 may be set to either AGC. When I say input 2, channel 2 will be set to AGC or to a higher level just to protect you in case they really go over. And then this is where I choose the what are the inputs for channel 3. It's either input 1, the internal mic, or the MI shoe. Interesting, channel 4, I got the same thing. I got input 1 or input 2, the internal mic or channel 2 shoe. I want to talk about the Agc modes. This is something else further down. It's either mono or stereo for both channel 1 and 2, or for 3 and 4. You would set it to mono if you have 2 separate sources on channel 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. In other words, one may be a body pack, one may be a stick mic. So then it's mono. Stereo implies that the 2 sources are linked together. And that's important because if one side gets very loud all of a sudden, then the stereo is going to throttle back both, which is as it should be because of stereo. Okay, these are the assignable buttons. There are lots of them, and these are the defaults. And by the way, I'm running through this, but you guys will have a copy of this, so you can refer to it. These are buttons with pre-assignments. You can change any of them. On the other side of the camera, there's a focus mag and a direct menu. The direct menu is interesting. It takes a little bit of explanation. When you press that button in the viewfinder, you will see some of the items light up. Actually, one item will light up orange, and it'll stay lit for a certain amount of time. And during that time, you can either change what item is lit up, or you can change the value. You either go left and right or up and down. And so that's how to change things like iris without having to go to anything else. Or you can change the shutter. This is the online button. By default, it's set for network client mode. I suspect most of you don't have that, so just use it for something else. These are the buttons that are open, but as I said, all assignable buttons can be customized, used for whatever you want to do. Then there's full auto. This is something that a lot of people poo-poo because they're always told, "Oh, we don't use full auto." Let me tell you that when you're in a really run and gun situation or under a lot of pressure like riots, full auto is going to save you. It works extremely well, and I highly recommend that you think about using it. This shutter can be on or off, and this is where you put it on. If it is on, what the setting is determined by a menu, and that's the camera shutter. And so you can change the shutter speed here to basically some other speed all the way up to 1/2000th of a second. But the important one is ECS. That stands for Extended Clear Scan. And if you turn this on, you can dial in any frequency that you want. Why do you want to have this now? Well, the clear scan function was developed originally to deal with CRTs, cathode ray tubes. That's the old TV type of displays, and they would show a noise bar, and you could dial out that noise bar. And then when we went to LCD monitors, that went away, and nobody used it anymore. Well, now with LED lights, especially in homes, they tend to flicker. And maybe your eyes can't see it, but the camera sure can. And you can dial out, or you can dial in the frequency to get rid of the noise bar that you would see with the flickering LED lights. On the lens control, so there's a full manual focus position. You pull the focus ring back towards the body of the camera. It reveals this orange ring. And then when you try to turn the focus ring, it has physical stops at infinity and at close focus. And at that point, the servo motor is disengaged and you are in full manual focus, and that's all there is. If you push it forwards, then the focus ring will turn without stops, and you are in different modes depending upon these switches. If you are in the auto mode, then you're in auto mode, but with manual override. By manual override, what I mean is that you can turn this ring, the focus ring, and you can change focus, and then it'll stick on that up until it can't. If you go to the manual mode, then the focus isn't constantly trying to track, and you can either manually focus, or you can press and hold the push auto up till focus is attained, and then when you let go, then it's then it will stop trying to autofocus. The macro is nothing more than a limiter, and that's it. And here is how to set the focus priority. This is a super important feature. This camera has taken the best features out of different product lines that we make. It's taking the best features from the shoulder cameras, from the Handycam cameras, and even from the Alpha mirrorless cameras. And one thing we take from the Alpha mirrorless cameras is the face autofocus. And when you use the face autofocus, you've got three choices. You can do face priority AF. That means if it finds a face, it'll focus on it. And if it doesn't find a face, then it'll focus on the closest object that's in the frame. In the face priority, by the way, it will put a box around every face that it finds, and the one that's going to be used has a little orange line under it. You can use the joystick or the other menu navigation tools to change the face that it's actually going to track. And then once you're recording, that's what it'll track up till that face goes away, which is really, really handy. The face only AF means that if a person is, like, say, walks behind a tree and then comes out on the other side, it won't focus on the tree and then go back to the face. It'll simply stay out of focus up until it sees a face. When I say out of focus, it won't go hunting up until there's another face there. And off means that it's not even going to use face detection. Steadyshot is just as the name implies, it will help steady your shots if you're hand holding the camera. It should be turned off when the camera's placed on a tripod. Otherwise, you may see a little bit of a jiggle. Frankly, I've never seen it, but some people have. The iris, like everything else, it can be set for manual or auto. And in the manual mode, there is a button on the side of the camera that you can press that will give you temporary auto iris up until you let go. This is the zoom control under the lens. If you want to do any control automatically or with motors, you got to have it in servo mode. If it's manual, then you can do a manual whip zoom. Lens hood shutter open close. Press the button, take off the shutter. The top view. Okay, these are the menus again. The thumbnail view. This is very useful, but I got to warn you that it's something that can lead to some grief, because if the thumbnail's on, typically everything else is disabled and it's grayed out, and people don't know why. And you press the thumbnail button, oh, everything comes back. Once you're in the thumbnails, you choose the clip that you want, and then this will let you play that clip. This is the status button. There are basically 12 status screens that you can go through, and you can navigate them with the joystick or the up and down here, or with the rotary knob on the side of the camera. And this is just some of the screens. This is the first one. Again, a lot of this stuff is obvious. It's in the screen anyhow. This is the important one that I want to point out. It's screen number 2. And this is very important because it's the only screen that will show you the audio levels for channel 3 and 4. And if you're on here and then you press the status button to make the screen go away, the next time you press the status button, even if you changed everything else on the camera, you changed the batteries, you weren't powered for a week, it'll still come back to the screen. These are the assignable buttons. This happens to be what was on the camera when I grabbed this screenshot. There are buttons that are there are some status screens that are very important if you're trying to debug some networking issues. And this is the GPS just showing you the information that it's giving you. And again, this is not phoning home. It's this just gets attached to your clip as metadata. The display toggles what's in the viewfinder. The volume control lets you change the volume of what you're monitoring or for playback. The duration, this is kind of obvious. It will basically toggle between the time code, clocks, and U-bit. On the back of the camera, this is the all-important power button. People who pick up the camera the first time can't find it, so that's why I'm pointing it out to you. Media door and latch. You press this button twice to remove the media. And let me warn you about something here. As soon as you touch that button, the media is instantly disconnected electrically from the camera. That means that if you were recording, you are no longer recording. It was like you yanked out the media in the middle of recording. So just be aware of that. There's the battery release button. Safe practice is turn off the power switch. You press the battery button in, you take out the battery. Over here, this is the slot select switch. I can change this while I'm recording. And before we go there, let's talk about media options for the cameras. So first of all, we have three types of current S/S media. Starting from the top, the fastest and most expensive media is the S/S Pro X. There's the S/S Pro Plus, which is a little bit less expensive, a little bit slower, and then there's the S/S-1 Type C, and that's the slowest, but it's still way faster than the SDXC cards. So most stations that are using this are in fact using the S/S-1. If you're going to use the media card, the SDXC cards in a Sony adapter, so there are some caveats you have to be aware of here. Number one is that the SDXC card or the SDHC card, they both have to be class 10 or faster. The file system is determined by the type of card. If it's 64 gig or more SDXC, it must be exFAT. If it's 32 gig or less, it must be FAT. That's just how it has to be. And the SDXC card can only record MPEG-2 420, and the SDXC card can record XAVC L50, L35, L25, MPEG-2 HD 422, and MPEG-2 420. Bottom line is never use the standard FAT cards, meaning the SDHC cards in the camera, because it's really limited. These are what can be recorded. The S/S Pro X and Pro Plus can record everything. The S/S-1C cannot record XAVC-I 4K because it's just too fast, or the L200. And it can record everything else, and the simultaneous recorder on one card is also not fast enough for that. What simultaneous recorder on one card means is I can record 4K and HD on the same card at the same time. And the SDXC card can only record XAVC L50, L35, and L25. Seamless playback. This lets you play back clip back to back to back seamlessly. And so this is the minimum clip duration that you need in order to play back without any pauses. So it's 4 seconds or 2 seconds for the Pro X and the Pro Plus, and it's twice that for the 1C. And with the SDXC card, you just can't do it. So we put in cards. There's a little arrow that tells you which side goes in. That's important. You want to be sure that the arrow goes in first. When you're doing this. And on this camera, so these pictures are actually taken with a different camera, but it's the same thing. The camera, so the cards have to be put in properly. That means they have to be facing on this camera. They have to be facing, as you're looking at it from the back, towards your right. And this arrow has to be pointing in. In this case, this arrow is pointing out. At this point, this position is stuck. Don't try to pull it out. You will ruin the camera. Well, you won't ruin it, but it will cost you about $1,000 to get it fixed. There's a way of getting it out that doesn't cost you anything. And first of all, what's the problem? The problem is, if you take a look here, there is no lip on this ridge over here or here. These are two cards that are fine. This card has a little ridge, and that's for stability because of the construction of this adapter that has to have a slot in it they put in media. That ridge will get hung up on an internal spring. And if that happens, bad things happen. So what you do is you put so to get out a stuck adapter, you put the adapter about halfway into the camera. You take a piece of paper or thin plastic cut to the width of the adapter and place it over the front of the front side of the adapter. So typically you have more than one adapter, so you can do it afterwards, but it's nice to just cut it beforehand. And I don't suggest that you try doing it. I mean, just cut the paper. Hey, by the way, business cards are too thick, they won't work. And don't try to tear the paper if you're out in the field, because then you have little fibers and they'll get hung up on the spring, and then you'll spend about a half hour trying to pick them out with a dental pick. Ask me how I know that. Anyhow, you put the paper all the way in and you'll feel it clear the end of the adapter. Then once you do that, you hold the paper and the adapter and you gently remove it from the camera. You may have to jiggle the paper a little bit, but everything comes out and life is good. And I always put on bigger labels just to tell people. Of course, these are my cards and they get shared, so that's why I have this here. Okay, here's the media light when media is inserted. By the way, I can put both pieces of media into the camera at the very same time, but for the sake of this, the status light here is orange, showing the media is being accessed. Do not take it out. Now it's green. It's a standby mode. You can take it out. You put in a second piece of media. You don't want to take out this piece of media up until the light goes off. If you're in simultaneous record mode, then both lights will be green. The slot select switch, this will let you change from one slot to the other. You can press this while you're recording. If you do, any clip that you have recorded will be closed on one piece of media. A new clip is started on the second piece of media. And if you put those two clips head to tail, you get a perfect edit. There's no gap, there's no overlap, the time code is continuous, and there's no noise on the video. Okay, so over here, this light is orange, you're recording to it, I changed it, now I'm recording the other one, etc. The problem is this, that if I'm recording on this piece of media and then I touch this button over here, I get a message that says that the media has been removed. At this point, I got a problem. So when I put the media back in, it'll say media needs to be restored, restore media now. The answer to that is always yes. Now remember, you have to restore the media in the same model device that it was in when there was a problem. So you could not restore this media in a Z750 camera, for example. But you can restore it in a different Z280. You say execute, it takes anywhere from 20 seconds to about a minute, and that depends on the size of the media and how big the clip was, and everything is restored, life is good, and you may lose the last 2 or 3 seconds, and that's it. Okay, media recovery. On S/S media, the clip has to be at least 2 seconds or longer and supported on all cameras. The SDXC media adapter. It's not supported on the shoulder cameras, but it is supported on this camera for clips that are more than a minute long. So if you shot a 50-second clip and you pulled it out, I'm sorry, you can't get it back. And the SDHC, that's 32 gig or smaller, cannot be recovered, period. This is the DC input connector. This is the, so this top connector is a micro USB connector. And I can use this to connect the camera to my computer and use it as a card reader. This is a type A connector, and this is used either for a 4G LTE modem, or I can connect an HDD or USB media, like a thumb drive to it, and then I can copy all the clips to that card. And these are the, so I go to media, go to USB, and I can either choose a folder, I can rename a folder, I can format the USB drive, I can copy it. I don't like it because you can't pick and choose the clips. It basically will take the entire piece of media, the S/S card or the card that's in the adapter, and it will copy every clip to this drive. Okay, there's a proxy utility slot. This is where I do software upgrades, and this is where the proxy gets recorded to. There's an HDMI connector. The HDMI connector is going to be off unless you turn it on, and it has to be turned on. And some functions like networking may require one or more outputs to be turned off. This is the RJ45 Ethernet port for the wired LAN. Again, this has to be turned on, and when you go to turn this on, you'll be oftentimes told that you got one or more network devices working or video. You have to turn something off because you just don't have enough resources. There's the SDI out. Again, you have to turn on the SDI out. You can pick and choose the format, by the way. That's in the menu. This is the in. That's the TCI in, and over here, this is the Genlock in, or the video out. No one uses video out, so let's not worry about that. This is the left side view is time code in or out. That's the switch to choose that. That's the LANC connector for remote control. These are the input connectors. And remember, input 2 may not be here. You may not have anything on this. Instead, it will copy to channel 2, whatever's on channel 1, unless you change the menu selection. So remember, this has to, if you plan on using input 2, then channel 2 external input select has to be set to input 2. This is record start stop buttons over here. There's one on the back of the handle, and there's joystick set. There's also another one on top of the handle. What's interesting is that if you're in simultaneous record mode, you can separate those two buttons and have one, either each button will control recording to both pieces of media, or one button will control the slot A, and one controls slot B, or vice versa. These are the zoom controls on the handle. And by the way, the latest software fixes a problem that earlier software had a problem with this zoom control. It didn't go slow enough, and it was very jerky. And now it goes to a very, very pleasantly slow creeping zoom, and it's very, very smooth. And in order for that to work, obviously the zoom control has to be in the servo mode. On top of the camera, there's yet another USB connector, and this is only for a 4G LTE modem, and it cannot use to charge your phone, so don't try. There's a multi-interface shoe on the camera, and this can be used either for light panels or for the wireless receiver. If you're going to use it for a light panel, it doesn't power the light panel. It only will trigger it on and off. The light panel does require its own source of power. If you're going to use a wireless receiver, be very careful, because there's a locking knob, and people have not locked this down sufficiently, and then they get noise because basically they have a lousy connection. So this has to be fully screwed down. And again, you don't have to use a Gorilla Grip to screw it down, but it should be screwed down so it's hand tight. This is the wireless receiver attached to the rear. This is the one to the front. Okay, next. These are thumbnails, and talk about format compatibility. And so the first question is, why is playback disabled? This symbol here, people call up all the time and say, what does that symbol mean? Well, it means you can't play it back. Okay, why am I getting it? You're getting it because something doesn't match. So here's the deal. In order to display clip thumbnails and play clips, the camera's format settings have to match the clip's format. First, there's the codec family. It has to be XAVC or MPEG-2, so that has to match. The actual codec has to match. In case of XAVC, is it L versus I? In case of MPEG-2, is it 420 or 422? They have to match. The resolution has to match, and these are all the 4 different resolutions that the camera supports. The frequencies have to match, and this is what the camera supports. Okay, so everything has to match in order to be able to play it back. I say everything. Well, mostly everything. In some cases, that's not the case. So first of all, again, this is from a different camera, but it's the same concept here. When you set up the frequency and the file system, the record format, you do that in the menu. And when you're done, it shows up in the upper left of the, upper right of the camera screen. So this shows me the resolution, this shows me the frequency, this shows me the codec. All right, when I highlight a clip, it will show me how it's been set up. This shows me the codec, this shows me the resolution, this shows me the frequency down the bottom. Combining the two together, I can play this clip because the camera is set to the same codec, to the same codec family, the same codec, the same resolution, same frequency. Life is good. The next clip I can't play because it's a different resolution. So I'm stuck. I can't play that clip. If I need to play that, I have to go into the camera settings and change the resolution so it matched what that clip was. It can't play this clip because it's a different codec family. So even if I change the resolution, it still wouldn't work up until I change the codec family. This clip, I don't even get a thumbnail because it's a different codec family altogether. It's not just different codec, it's just a totally different codec family. So it's XAVC versus MPEG-2. If I change the camera to be XAVC, now I can't see all the MPEG codecs, but I can see all of the other clips. And so this is the clip, the same, which is basically the same codec family, the same codec, the same resolution, everything's good. Of course I can play that. But here I can even play on this camera a clip that is XAVC L200, a different resolution, and a different frequency. So it's pretty cool. All right. But I cannot play an XAVC I clip. So that's there. I just, for the sake of being proper, I don't want you tearing your hair out looking for the XAVC L200 codec. This camera doesn't have it. It actually comes from a Z750. But the same concept applies. All the XAVC Ls are fully supported, and you can see anything. Okay, this camera has something that is very, very important that you must be aware of. This has a fixed lens, and we have to do an auto flange back adjustment occasionally. How will you know if you have to do it? You will know if as you change the zoom, the picture goes in and out of focus. Okay, and now I'm not talking about it being soft on the wide angle side because it's a wide angle. I'm talking about like somewhere in the middle, it gets sharp or gets out of focus and then comes back into focus. So to do this, the FB stands for the flange back. That's just between the lens mount surface and the image sensor plane. Performance adjustment if the correct focus cannot be maintained when zooming the lens. It is important that the depth of field at the wide angle end makes it impossible to focus the lens at that setting and then zoom in with proper focus. At the wide angle side, honestly, you're guessing. When shooting, always focus at the telephoto end and then zoom out. So these are the settings that you have to do first to prepare the camera to do the auto flange back adjust. In the category system, the record format has to be set and the frequency has to be set to 5994. The record format, video format has to be set to 4K. The auto exposure, auto shutter has to be on. And the easiest way of doing that is, again, using the direct menu, actually. The camera gain should be set to low, although I've done it when it's not set to low, but it's best if you do set it to low. The LCD viewfinder, the marker has to be set to on, and you have the center marker on. It can be anything except for off. So you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4, but not off. The camera settings for the auto flange back adjust part 2 is the f-stop has to be wide open, F19. The iris manual auto mode should be set for manual. The zoom servo man has to be set onto servo. The full auto mode has to be off, and the ND filter should be set for anything that you want that'll give you a proper exposure. And here's the procedure. You place a high contrast target like a star chart on the wall. Place the camera about 10 feet from the wall. Make sure there are no objects in front of the target that are visible at the wide angle setting. Now, I'm not worried about chairs on the side. I'm worried about if you have a desk in front of the target and you have stuff on the desk. When the camera goes wide, it's going to see those, try to focus on that instead and mess it up. And make sure that there are no bright light sources visible in the viewfinder at the wide angle setting. The center marker on, zoom in at full telephoto and center the target in the viewfinder. Then zoom the lens out to the wide angle setting, and you're finally set to go. You execute the auto flange back adjust. You go to the camera category, auto flange back adjust, execute. It takes about a minute or so. You'll see the camera zoom in. It will get best focus. It'll think about it a while, then it'll zoom out, and it'll get best focus, think about it a while, and then it will update all the settings, and then it'll come back. And then your job is to then check it and see if it seems right. If it's not right, just do it again, but chances are it'll be right. You should do this every time that, like, at least like once a month. Well, you should check to see if you need it maybe once a month. That's probably a better way of saying it. If the camera took any hard knocks, I would certainly check it. If you check it and it seems fine, doing the auto flange back adjust isn't going to do you any good. However, you can do it as many times as you want, and it's not going to hurt you either. It just takes time to set it all up. Here is a video, a how-to from Doug Jensen's how-to video. The YouTube link here deals only with the auto flange back adjustment issue. And the Vimeo video covers that and also two other issues. And the two issues that he covers is, one is that people say the lens is very, very soft, wide open. And he discovered that it's not 100% true. If you open the iris so that you're pretty much open, then you maintain sharpness. Because people are often shooting wide angle with the iris shut down, then you get diffraction effects. And that's what's causing the problem. So that's one thing. And then he also covers the issue of distortion at the widest angle. So the camera definitely has a little bit of distortion at the very, very end of the wide angle scale. And he points out that it's not an issue and there are two ways of dealing with it. So that's that. Any questions?
While we wait for that, David, you want to show some video of stuff you've done with the 280
Okay.
recently? Is that correct?
I will stop
yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about some of the stuff that we shot recently. I tell you what, though, I feel like I lose photog points when I talk about how much I love the autofocus function, but it's really good. Particularly, granted, I understand that network level, we're probably using the camera a little bit differently than how we would have in local. I can't remember the last time I put a 280 on a tripod. I've usually got it on a monopod, and I'm walking backwards, as I think most of us are, you know, at CNN when we're using the camera. So there's two things that I really like about the camera. Its low light performance is really, really good. I have a tiny little LED top light that I throw on top of the camera for when we're doing night protests or night shoots, and I have to crank that thing down as low as it will go to correctly expose my correspondent with the background, with the street lights and everything. Its low light performance is really good, but I think its best feature is, for us, how nimble it is. I can show you, if I remember how to do this without breaking the internet. I can show you this clip. So I managed to get the good vantage point here for this assignment. I got to stand on top of the 5-star hotel while my colleagues were down on the street. But this being DC, we're a network town. A lot of the guys were running around with the big broadcast cameras, and we managed to be a little bit more nimble going through the crowd. The guys with the smaller cameras and being able to throw it on full auto in this kind of setting is great, because you want to be looking around and seeing, am I about to get popped? What's going on around me? And it helps you create a little bit of situational awareness. The face tracking in this is great as well. I was playing around. I was at another protest today, got to throw on the face tracking, and it did a fantastic job. So this is my colleague, Peter Morris. He's shooting on the 280. Usually we do have it on the monopod. There's some edits in this video too. This isn't exactly how it went to air. But being able to get in there and amongst it and still, you know that your shot is in focus. If you throw it on full auto, knowing that it's going to be pretty well in focus. Doesn't do a great job on focusing on people wearing gas masks.
Yeah.
The face detection doesn't pick that up too good. But I tell you what, Joe and I were talking about this earlier. In CNN, if you're pushing out a live shot and something's going on, they'll come to you, and the control room will not usually tell us. Sometimes they tell us, other times it's a bit of a surprise. So this is in DC. I think we're about to come to a clip in Minneapolis. And this was after a bunch of flashbangs and pepper balls and tear gas went off. This is Minneapolis. So it looks like, okay, here we go. So there's me dressed like a Ninja Turtle. So we're pulling back. We think we're done. We're of the understanding that, hey, the control room's not going to take our shot for a little while. And so this is my colleague, Wayne Cross. He we're just regrouping at this point. We're not even shooting a shot, and we've got the camera on the monopod and it's light enough. If this were a full broadcast camera, we would have the strap over our shoulder and the camera would be bouncing around and will be hitting our knees and everything would be completely unusable. But here we are, and we're able to push back a perfectly usable shot. And then we zoom in, we start using shots. I will say the full auto is very good. If you are going to do B-roll, if you're going to be zooming in, picking off very specific things, it's not great for all the reasons that you would expect it not to be great. But for just a wide shot to get a sense of what's going on, if you've got cars driving by, you're going to get that dip in the exposure and then it's going to correct itself.
Do you have any like limits or on the auto set for the full auto that kind of maybe help, I guess, help control what you would prefer the camera not to go,
Yeah, so I think Joe might be able to chime in on this. What you've got, if you've got something set in manual on the outside of the camera, full auto won't drive the bus on that, right?
Hang on, let me try to get to the menu. Give me a second. I need to change my camera. Filter, video.
And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A panel or in the chat. If there's anything at all you missed or might want to go back to, we can get to that.
So while Joe's looking that up, I will say there's a few other things that I do really like about the camera. The variable ND is really great. Looks like Joe's found the thing.
So for it. Yeah, I've definitely found it here. Give me a second, minute. Let me kill this guy.
Do watch for I just happened to grab a camera that was suffering from this today for my shoot. This is still an issue. The shock mount for the your shotgun microphone, still not great. Still very fragile. But if you can't fix it with gaff tape, then I don't think you're allowed to be in the NPPA.
So here's the deal. Here are some of the different things that you can change. If you look at my screen, so here's some things that you can change.
There we go.
Stop sharing here.
Okay, so first of all, you can change what the mode is, and the choices are spotlight, standard, or backlight. That depends on, standard means it's basically flat lighting. Backlight means, just like it says, that that the subject is being backlit, and spotlight is they're being spotlit. So that's one thing. You can change how quickly the things, how fast the auto exposure responds. You can change the auto ND filter. You can turn it on or off, so you can so that you can throw in the ND filter to make changes there as well. The Agc limits, you can basically change that. You can put in a limit, and what the Agc point is that when do we start to increase the gain? So, for example, if I know that I want to use a f5.6 f-stop, I can make this f5.6, and now the Agc point has just changed. So I will change, later as opposed to sooner, or vice versa, depending upon the direction that you're coming from. The auto shutter can be either on or off, and then I can change what the shutter limits are and when does shutter kick in. So here, the shutter's kicking in at f16. I can make it kick in at f11 or f8. So these are the kind of things. The clip highlight, where the detect window is, there are basically different kinds of detection windows that you have. Do I want to have an indication of that? The average peak level ratio, the custom width and custom height and custom position. This is for the box of where it's actually looking at. So these are the things that you can change in the auto exposure portion of the full auto. Now, basically, changing the focus will change how the full auto deals with focus. Is it going to look for faces or not? And so that's what you can change.
Gotcha. And that's really good to dial into if you're an MMJ, being able to control, being able to set the parameters for your exposure, and as you know, and even just hitting that full auto button and using the face tracking as well, so you can nail your focus if you're doing a stand up or you're one man banding an interview. There's some neat ways to tweak it.
One of the things I would highly recommend, though, is whatever you're going to change, something like that, you should be bold. You should go ahead and change it, but you should experiment first so you know what's going to happen. In other words, don't view the camera as what came down has been cast in stone and I must not change it because Japan knows best. Not necessarily the case. But on the other hand, try it before you go ahead and start making changes, because you may, because your understanding may be different from what's actually happening.
Yeah. So how does face autofocus work with multiple faces in the frame out in the field?
It will actually find all the faces that it can recognize as faces, and it'll put a little square around it. And the face that's closest, when it starts, will have a little orange box under it. You can then press the set button and that'll lock onto that face. And that's it.
Cool.
I mean, it's very easy. I was really hoping to have some shots that I could share with you, but unfortunately, I just couldn't do that. I mean, the first time that I saw it work, I actually stumbled on it by accident. Honestly, I was in somebody's office and they had pictures of their kids on their desk behind them. And I turned on and I said, what? It actually found all the faces and put little squares around them. I said, that's absolutely amazing.
I will say, watch out for harsh lighting. It tends to lose faces a little bit if you've got any kind of harsh shadows. Hopefully you're not lighting your interview like that. But if you're trying to get B-roll of someone as they walk by, I have noticed it will lose them a little bit, depending on what the lighting situation is.
And also face masks don't work real well. But I think we're past that, maybe. Hopefully.
Okay, not seeing any questions. I guess we're kicking it over to Victoria.
Yep. Victoria, you there?
Okay, well, until she goes, I just want to say one
I am
thing.
here. I apologize.
All good, all good.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Sorry about that. So thank you guys so much. This is great. No questions. I'm looking in the chat. Nothing. Dave, thank you so much. It's so interesting to see your video from the protest. I was right there too. So I was in the thick of it. It was nice to see that you had a nice little bird's eye view. So
I was very jealous on top there. Yes.
And Joe, thank you so much for your expertise. I really appreciate it.
My great pleasure.
Thank you guys for joining us. This has been a fun group here. I actually learned a lot, which is good, which I know my photographers will appreciate. So Stingray, thank you so much for everything. And you guys have a good night.